If knowledge is meant to bring us closer to truth, why do those who know the most often feel the least certain about ultimate meaning? This is not merely poetic irony, it's one of the defining paradoxes of our age. Humanity has mastered the mechanics of nature, mapped the genome, and probed the depths of the cosmos. Yet despite this vast accumulation of information, confusion about life's purpose has never been greater. Imam Abu Hamid al, writing almost 1,000 years ago, anticipated this condition. He claimed that all true knowledge, when rightly understood, leads to God, to him. Ignorance was not the absence of data, it was the absence of orientation. Knowledge without a sense of its ultimate destination becomes scattered and self-defeating. In this lecture, we will explore how Al-Ghazali reconstructed the meaning of knowledge, from sensory perception to spiritual insight, and why his framework may hold the key to reuniting reason, science, and meaning in a fragmented world. Modern life suffers not from a lack of knowledge, but from its disintegration. Information is abundant, yet integration is rare. We have specialists in every field, but few who can explain how the pieces connect. This condition, what philosophers call epistemic fragmentation, creates a subtle psychological burden. People know about many things, but rarely know what for. From a cognitive standpoint, the human brain seeks coherence. Studies in neuroscience show that meaning arises from patterns of connectivity across neural networks. When information lacks structure or purpose, the brain experiences dissonance. This is why excessive data can generate anxiety instead of clarity. Al-Ghazali foresaw this intellectual crisis centuries ago. He warned that when knowledge loses its reference to the first cause, the ultimate ground of existence, it becomes like a map with no destination. One may know every detail of the terrain, but still not know where one is going. The question, then, is not how much we know, but how our knowing connects to the unity of reality. How can the mind rediscover the source from which all understanding flows? Imam Al-Ghazali was born in 1058 in Tawz, in what is now Iran. A brilliant jurist, theologian, and philosopher, he mastered every major field of knowledge in the Islamic world. His early career brought him immense fame, but also deep spiritual unrest. He realized that intellectual brilliance alone could not yield certainty. In his autobiographical work Deliverance from Error, Al-Ghazali describes how, after years of teaching and writing, he was struck by a crisis of meaning. He could define truth logically, but could not feel its reality. Through years of introspection and spiritual discipline, he came to a profound realization. Knowledge detached from divine orientation collapses into skepticism. He concluded that every branch of true knowledge, when traced to its origin, reveals God as its ultimate truth. This was not a rejection of reason, but a redefinition of its function. Reason's purpose is illumination, not accumulation. Knowledge should refine perception until it recognizes the unity that underlies all phenomena. Al-Ghazali's theory of knowledge unfolds as a hierarchy, a ladder of understanding that moves from observation to illumination. He divided knowledge into 3 levels. The first is sensory knowledge, information gathered through the senses. This is the foundation of empirical science. It allows us to measure, test, and describe physical phenomena, but it is limited to appearances. It tells us how things behave, not why they exist. The second is rational knowledge, the domain of reason, abstraction, and logic. It allows us to connect facts, form theories, and construct meaning systems. Yet reason for Ghazali remains bounded by its own assumptions. It can explain relations between things, but not the ultimate cause of their being. The third and highest is illuminative or spiritual knowledge, direct experiential knowing that arises when the intellect is purified of self-centered bias. This is not mystical emotion, but what he called knowledge by presence, knowing reality by direct awareness, not by conceptual mediation. Modern cognitive science mirrors this structure. Psychologists distinguish between procedural knowing, conceptual knowing, and experiential knowing. Each level integrates the one before it. For Ghazali, this ascent of knowledge mirrors the ascent of consciousness itself. Science, philosophy, and spirituality are not rival domains but successive refinements of perception, steps in the soul's journey toward understanding the real. Ghazali argued that when knowledge is severed from its metaphysical ground, it becomes self-contradictory. Facts without purpose generate disorientation. The intellect may know countless details, but fail to grasp their meaning in contemporary terms. This is the psychological condition of cognitive overload. Modern individuals process vast streams of data, yet experience rising levels of uncertainty and meaninglessness. Information without orientation becomes noise. Ghazali saw the same risk among philosophers of his age, who studied the cosmos while ignoring its creator. They know the branches, he wrote, but not the root. Without grounding, the intellect becomes a tool that refines illusion rather than dissolving it. Existential psychologists reach a similar conclusion. When people lose contact with an ultimate framework of meaning, they face what Viktor Frankl called the existential vacuum. Knowledge that does not answer why leads eventually to despair. For Ghazali, every act of true understanding must return to unity. The intellect is a mirror. When it reflects only fragments, perception fractures. When it reflects the whole, knowledge becomes worship, an act of witnessing the order and harmony of divine intelligence, manifest in creation. In Al-Ghazali's view, all forms of knowledge converge upon one reality. Astronomy, ethics, medicine, and theology are not disconnected pursuits, but expressions of a single divine wisdom viewed through different lenses. The tragedy of modernity, he might say, is not that we know too much, but that we fail to see how our knowing connects. We have divided reality into subjects, but truth itself remains undivided. For Ghazali, each discipline performs a complementary function. Natural science investigates how creation operates. Philosophy inquires why it is intelligible. Revelation reveals who it all refers to. Modern cognitive science offers a parallel insight. The human brain is a pattern-seeking organ. Coherence across domains is essential for mental stability. Fragmented thinking leads to cognitive dissonance, while integrative understanding promotes well-being and clarity. Thus, the conflict between science and spirituality is not inherent in reality. It arises from the fragmentation of human attention. When perception unifies, truth across disciplines aligns. Every discovery becomes another window onto the same light. For Al-Ghazali, knowledge is valuable only when it transforms the knower. To know something in theory but remain unchanged by it is, in his words, to carry knowledge as a burden, not as light. He called this gap between knowing and being knowledge without action. It is the illusion of understanding without inner transformation. Modern psychology validates this distinction. According to experiential learning theory, knowledge becomes integrated only through lived practice. Similarly, neuroscience shows that learning reshapes neural pathways through repetition and reflection. a process known as neuroplasticity. Therefore, knowledge that does not reshape behavior or perception remains external. It informs but does not reform. In Ghazali's view, genuine knowledge harmonizes cognition, emotion, and intention. It refines attention, regulates desire, and orients consciousness toward the real. The more deeply one understands the order of existence, the more one's own being aligns with that order. Knowledge, then, is not accumulation but transformation, the gradual becoming of what one knows. After years of inquiry, Al-Ghazali reached a startling conclusion. To truly know God is to realize that the finite mind cannot contain the infinite. This is not a confession of defeat, but a recognition of epistemic humility. The highest wisdom, he argued, is awareness of the limits of reason. In modern cognitive terms, this is metacognition, the capacity to know that one does not know. Research in psychology shows that such awareness correlates with intellectual maturity and reduces overconfidence bias. Ghazali's paradox is that the deeper one's knowledge grows, the more one perceives dependence on divine illumination. The mind does not possess truth, it participates in it. The intellect is not the source of light, but the instrument through which light is perceived. Thus, humility is not anti-intellectual, it is the final stage of clear seeing. The closer knowledge approaches its source, the more silent it becomes. The thinker no longer claims mastery, but recognition, that all thought itself is a reflection of the one who knows. How can Al-Ghazali's insight guide us today? First, through integrative learning, bridging rather than isolating disciplines. Modern education often fragments inquiry into unrelated silos. A Ghazalian approach would ask how physics, psychology, and ethics converge in their search for order and meaning. Second, through introspective study, understanding that the act of knowing also reveals the knower. Every external truth discovered mirrors an internal principle. Third, through ethical alignment, measuring learning by behavioral coherence, not memorization. The purpose of education is not just to know what is true, but to embody it. And fourth, through contemplative awareness, cultivating reflection before knowledge, a pause that reconnects intellect to purpose. Research in the psychology of meaning confirms that life satisfaction correlates strongly with a sense of coherence, perceiving unity across one's experiences. In this light, Al-Ghazali's vision becomes strikingly modern, reintegrating. Knowledge with meaning restores both intellectual clarity and emotional well-being. When learning becomes a path of self-unification, knowledge itself becomes a form of worship, the mind's devotion to truth. Al-Ghazali's hidden truth is not that every subject mentions God, but that every genuine inquiry points toward Him. The physical, rational, and spiritual are not competing domains. They are concentric circles around one reality. When the knower, the known, and the act of knowing are understood as interdependent reflections of one divine intelligence, knowledge fulfills its purpose. To know, in the deepest sense, is to remember, to trace every pattern back to its source. The end of all learning is not mastery, but clarity, not possession, but participation in meaning itself. And so, the question remains, if all knowledge leads to God, what kind of learner are you becoming? A collector of facts or a seeker of truth?